It was my birthday. I should have been laughing, celebrating, blowing out candles with someone who loved me. Instead, I was standing in the doorway of my own bedroom, staring at the ugliest truth I'd ever seen. Ethan was in bed with Martha, my housekeeper, a woman in her 50s who had folded my laundry, scrubbed my floors, smiled politely every morning when she brought in the mail, and there she was half naked, tangled in sheets that were supposed to be mine. For a moment, I froze, my stomach turned, my vision blurred. Ethan's voice hit me like a slap. She's so cold. Claire doesn't even let me touch her half the time. You're real, Martha, you're warm. I thought I was going to faint. 3 years of my life, 3 years of supporting him, building him up, paying his bills, investing in his big ideas. I bought his car, covered his rent, even poured $500,000 into that useless little company he kept calling a startup. And all this time, he was lying next to me at night, pretending, while sneaking around with the one woman I trusted most inside my home. I stumbled back into the hallway. My legs carried me downstairs before my brain could catch up. I barely made it to the bathroom before I started throwing up. It wasn't just disgust, it was betrayal, humiliation, rage all rolled into one. When I finally looked up at the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. Mascara streaked down my cheeks, my lips were trembling. But it wasn't the broken look that scared me, it was the fire. Something inside me snapped that night. I wasn't going to be Ethan's victim, not me. He thought I was naive, soft, easy to fool. He thought I would keep funding his lifestyle even while he destroyed mine. No, he had no idea who I was. By the time I grabbed my keys and drove off, my mind was already working. Every dollar he had taken, I would take back. Every ounce of pride he stripped away, I'd make him choke on. I ended up at Sophie's bar. Sophie had been my best friend since college. The one person who always told me the truth even when I didn't want to hear it. She spotted my face the second I walked in. Claire, what happened? You look like hell. I dropped onto a stool, my hands still shaking. You were right, Soph. All those times you told me Ethan wasn't good for me, I should have listened. I caught him, with Martha, in my bed. Her eyes went wide. That son of a she slammed a glass onto the counter, poured me a shot, and shoved it toward me. Drink. I downed it in one swallow. My throat burned, but not enough to kill the ache in my chest. Tears spilled anyway, hot and messy. I gave him everything. I whispered, and he looked at me like I was the problem, like I wasn't enough. He told her I was cold. Sophie's jaw clenched. Claire, he's trash. You don't waste 3 more seconds on a man like that. We'll get even. We'll ruin him. Her anger fueled mine. I wiped my tears, forced my voice steady. I'm not letting him win. I want everything back, my money, my time, my dignity. And I want him to suffer while I take it. That's when I noticed the man sitting alone in the corner booth. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a white shirt that looked like it belonged more in a hospital than a bar. Wire-rimmed glasses perched low on his nose. His whole presence was distant, controlled, like he carried his own silence around him, and no one dared to step into it. I leaned closer to Sophie. Who's that? She followed my gaze, then smirked. Oh, that's Daniel Collins, Ethan's uncle, the doctor. Practically runs half the hospital downtown. Daniel Collins, Ethan's uncle. An idea hit me so fast I almost laughed. If Ethan could betray me with the most inappropriate person imaginable, then maybe I could return the favor. And wouldn't it be poetic if Ethan's downfall came from me turning the one man he respected most into mine? I straightened my shoulders, wiped my face with the back of my hand. Soph, I'm going to talk to him. She raised her brows. You sure about that? He doesn't exactly look like the small talk type. I don't care, I said, already sliding off the stool. My heart pounded, but it wasn't nerves, it was determination. If Ethan thinks he can play me, then I'll show him who he's dealing with. And that's how it started. Not the heartbreak, not the tears, those came first, sure. But that walk across the bar toward Daniel Collins, that was the beginning of something bigger. Something that would break Ethan, change me, and force me to see exactly what I was capable of. I told myself I wasn't nervous. But as I crossed that bar, my legs felt heavier with every step. Daniel Collins didn't even glance up when I stopped in front of his table. He just kept sipping his drink, calm as a stone. Hey, I said, leaning a little closer than necessary. Mind if I sit? His eyes lifted, finally. They were sharper than I expected, dark, steady. The kind that made you feel stripped down to your bones. I do mind, that was it. No hesitation, no polite excuse. Just 3 words that hit like a door slamming in my face. I blinked. Wow, you always this charming, or am I just special? He set his glass down and pushed his chair back. Miss, you've had too much to drink. Go back to your friend. Something in me snapped again, not like earlier, when I cried until my body gave out. This time it was pride. He didn't even know me, but he was already dismissing me, just like Ethan did whenever I asked for more than scraps of his attention. I stepped forward, closer than I should have, and pretended to trip. My hand shot out, aiming for Daniel's arm, but he moved back so fast I landed half on the table. A glass tipped, ice clinking onto the floor. Jesus, I muttered, flushing. Daniel stood. This conversation is over. His voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge of irritation. I should have backed off. Any sane woman would have, but sanity wasn't exactly driving me that night. My anger was. My need to hurt Ethan was. Fine, I said, straightening up, but you'll see me again, count on it. His brows lifted slightly, like he was curious despite himself, but he didn't answer. He just walked past me, leaving me standing there with my pulse pounding and my pride bruised. I staggered back to Sophie's side. She stared at me wide-eyed. Well, how'd it go? I grabbed her drink and gulped it down. He told me to get lost. Figures, she muttered. That man's got the emotional range of a brick wall. But I didn't care. I wasn't letting it end there. Something in his eyes cold as they were told me he noticed me. Maybe not in the way I wanted, not yet, but the seed was planted. And if there's one thing I know about men like Ethan, it's this. They can't stand losing control. If Ethan found out I had even a spark of connection with Daniel, it would drive him insane. That alone was worth the effort. By the time Sophie poured me into a cab that night, my head was spinning with more than alcohol. I had a plan forming. Not perfect, not clear, but enough to keep me awake until dawn, because I wasn't done with Daniel Collins, not by a long shot. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Ethan. The sight of his name on my screen made my stomach turn, but I picked up, forcing my voice soft. Practice. Hey, Ethan. Claire, baby, I feel terrible about last night. I was working late and I almost laughed. Working late, sure. It's fine. I lied smoothly, actually. I was thinking we could look at new cars today. You did say you wanted to get me something special for my birthday. There was a pause. He wasn't expecting that. Then, with forced warmth, of course, meet you at the dealership in an hour. Perfect. I hung up, staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My hand still shook as I applied lipstick, but my smile didn't. Last night had been about shock, pain, raw betrayal. Today would be different. Today I would play my part. Sweet, trusting Claire. The woman Ethan thought he could fool forever. But underneath, I was sharper than I'd ever been, and soon, he'd see just how dangerous I could be. That night at Sophie's bar, I had embarrassed myself in front of Daniel, but instead of making me want to crawl into a hole, it lit something inside me. I wanted him to see me again, not as a drunk mess, but as someone he couldn't ignore, and I knew exactly where to find him. Sophie's words echoed in my head. He practically runs half the hospital downtown. I wasn't done with Ethan, but before I could crush him the way he deserved, I needed an ally, or maybe just someone strong enough to stand in the wreckage with me. Either way, I was going to see Dr. Daniel Collins again, and this time, I wouldn't take no for an answer. Hospitals have always made me uneasy. The smell of disinfectant, the constant beep of machines, the shuffle of tired nurses, it all felt like another world. But that morning, I walked into St. Mary's Hospital like I belonged there. I'd done my homework. Sophie had pulled strings, whispered to a friend, and within hours I had Daniel's weekly schedule in my inbox. Wednesdays, 10 a.m., outpatient clinic, which meant if I walked into his office with the right excuse, he wouldn't be able to avoid me. I rehearsed my lines in the car, something casual. Maybe I'd say I was there visiting a friend, got turned around, thought I'd seen him. Something that didn't scream stalker x Yankees revenge plot. But life didn't give me the chance to use any of that. The moment I stepped off the elevator onto his floor, chaos broke out. An older man, white hair, angry eyes, was shouting in the hallway, blocking Daniel's office door. You let my grandson die. You think you can play God? You think we're nothing because we can't pay what you charge? My heart lurched. He wasn't just shouting, he had a knife. Nurses scattered, their faces pale. Security wasn't there yet, and Daniel, calm as ever, was standing just feet away. Trying to reason with him. Sir, please, Daniel said, voice steady. I understand your pain, but hurting someone else won't bring him back. Put the knife down. But the man's hands were shaking, rage boiling over, he stepped forward, blade raised, and then, out of nowhere, a woman came rushing from behind with another knife. She was aiming straight for Daniel's back. I didn't think. I didn't weigh the risks. I just moved. 1 second, I was standing there frozen. The next, I was throwing myself between her and Daniel. Pain ripped across my hand as the blade caught me. Hot and sharp, blood blooming instantly. Daniel, I gasped. His head whipped around. He caught me before I hit the ground, his arms firm around me. Behind us, security finally swarmed in, tackling the old man and the woman, dragging them away in a mess of shouts. But all I could feel was the burn in my hand, blood dripping fast. You're bleeding, Daniel said, his voice harsher than I'd ever heard. What the hell were you thinking? I winced, trying to catch my breath. You're welcome. He stared at me, eyes blazing. Not cold this time, not distant, furious. And underneath that fury, something else I couldn't quite name. He carried me into his office and sat me down, pulling out a first aid kit with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. His hands were sure but not gentle, pressing gauze to my skin, wrapping it tight. You could have been killed, he muttered. I bit back a grin, despite the pain, and yet, here I am. Guess I just have good timing. Daniel looked up at me then, really looked, his eyes softened, just for a second, before he turned away. 3 days. Keep it clean, change the dressing every 48 hours, no water, no heavy lifting. I tilted my head. So, you'll help me change it? His jaw tightened. You don't give up, do you? Nope. I smiled, the kind of smile I hadn't felt in weeks, real, sharp, alive. Because for the first time since Ethan shattered me, I felt something other than rage or grief. I felt powerful, not because I'd thrown myself in front of a knife, not because I'd finally cracked Daniel's icy shell, but because I realized I wasn't just fighting to tear Ethan down. I was fighting to build myself back up. And maybe, just maybe, Daniel Collins was going to be part of that story. That night, Ethan called again. His voice was slick with fake sweetness. Baby, I've been thinking, maybe it's time I proposed. Made it official. What do you say we announce it at the dinner next week? My stomach nodded, but I kept my tone light. That sounds perfect, he chuckled. Smug, I knew you'd say yes. I hung up, staring at my bandaged hand. Perfect. Sure. But if Ethan thought that dinner was going to end with me wearing his ring, he was out of his mind. No, that dinner would be the night he lost everything. And Daniel? If I had anything to say about it, he'd be right there watching Ethan crumble. The bandages itched. But every time I looked at them, I smiled. Not because of the pain I could have done without that, but because it was proof that Daniel had looked at me differently, even if just for a second. But I didn't have time to daydream. Ethan was still calling every morning, acting like the perfect fiancé. He didn't know that every yes, honey, and every fake laugh I gave him was just one more step toward the cliff I was leading him to. Sophie and I planned it over a bottle of wine in her office above the bar. You're sure he'll take the bait? She asked, scrolling through the fake investment portfolio her brother had mocked up for us. It looked real enough to fool almost anyone. Charts, projections, glossy numbers promising insane returns. I leaned back in my chair. Ethan's ego won't let him pass it up. He's always desperate to look like the smartest guy in the room, and if he thinks I've already invested, he'll throw in everything. Sophie finished, grinning. Men like him never miss a chance to prove themselves. Exactly. So when Ethan met me at a cafe the next afternoon, I put on my sweetest smile, the one he used to call irresistible. There's this opportunity, I whispered, sliding the folder across the table. High risk. But the payout could change everything. I already put in what I had. I wanted to tell you first, because, well, we're about to spend our lives together. His eyes lit up like Christmas morning. You already invested? With your parents' money? I nodded, lowering my gaze, pretending to look guilty. Yeah, don't be mad. I just didn't want us to miss out. But if you don't feel good about it, maybe I should pull out. No. He grabbed my hand. No, Claire. You did the right thing. I'll put in 2. How much do we need? 2 million at least. That's the minimum buy-in. I bit my lip like I was nervous. Ethan sat back, calculating. I could almost see the gears turning in his head. Who he could borrow from, what he could liquidate. He wasn't thinking about me. He was thinking about how he'd look when he bragged about this deal at the country club. I'll make it happen, he said finally, his tone firm. Don't worry, I'll take care of everything. I smiled and squeezed his hand. I knew I could count on you. Inside, I was already laughing. That night, Daniel called. I almost dropped the phone when I saw his name flash across my screen. Claire, he said, voice clipped. Like he hadn't decided yet if this was a mistake. You need to come back tomorrow so I can change your bandage. 3 days, remember? I leaned against the counter, grinning. So you were paying attention. Silence on the line. Then a sigh. 10 a.m., don't be late. When I showed up the next morning, he was already waiting. His office smelled faintly of coffee and antiseptic. He didn't smile, but his hands were careful as he unwrapped the bandage. Checking the wound. You heal fast, he muttered. Maybe I've got a good doctor, I teased. His eyes flicked to mine, then away. Or maybe you got lucky. I let the moment stretch. Lucky, huh? That's not what I'd call throwing myself in front of a knife exactly, he said, sharper now. You don't think. You just jump. You can't keep doing that, Claire. My throat tightened. No one had said my name like that in weeks. Firm, almost protective. Ethan always said it with impatience, like he was tired of me. But Daniel, he said it like it mattered. Maybe I don't want to think, I whispered. Thinking hurts too much. His hands stilled on the gauze for a second. I thought he'd say something that would change everything. But then he cleared his throat and stepped back. You're done here, he said. Come back in 2 days. I should have felt dismissed again. But this time, I didn't, because I'd seen at the crack in his armor. He felt something. He just didn't want to. And if there's one thing I'd learned in the past few weeks, it was this. The harder people tried to bury their feelings, the deeper those feelings ran. Meanwhile, Ethan was spiraling right into my trap. By the end of the week, he'd cashed out a property, drained accounts, and borrowed from people he shouldn't have. He was all in, and he couldn't stop bragging about how he'd secured a deal that would triple his money in no time. Every time he boasted, I smiled sweetly, nodding like the devoted fiancé, but inside, I was counting down the days until it all collapsed, because collapse it would. And when it did, Ethan Collins wouldn't just lose his money, he'd lose me, his pride, his future, everything. The night before our engagement dinner, I stood in front of the mirror, slipping into the gown I'd chosen carefully, white, simple, elegant. To anyone else, I looked like a bride. To me, it felt like armor. I touched the bandage on my hand one last time. Daniel's words echoed in my head. You can't keep doing that, Claire. Maybe he was right. But tomorrow wasn't about being safe. Tomorrow was about justice. And when Ethan stood beside me, waiting for applause, he'd get something very different instead. The ballroom was packed, crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, champagne glasses clinking. Everything screamed money and success. Ethan thrived in places like this. He lived for the applause, the fake smiles, the illusion that he was someone important. I stood beside him, my hand hooked through his arm, smiling like the picture-perfect fiancé. Inside, my stomach twisted, not from nerves but from anticipation. He leaned down, whispering, You look stunning, Claire. Everyone's jealous. I forced a laugh, pretending to blush, maybe. But in my head, I counted the seconds until his entire world burned. The speeches started, toasts were made. Ethan was glowing, shaking hands, soaking up the admiration. He had no idea the ground was about to crack open beneath him. Finally, it was my turn. I tapped the microphone, smiling sweetly at the crowd. Thank you all for being here tonight. Ethan and I are so grateful to celebrate our future with you, and because he means the world to me, I wanted to share something special. At my signal, the lights dimmed, the giant screen behind us flickered to life. For a second, silence. Then the video started. Gasps filled the room. There was Ethan clear as day rolling around in bed with Martha. Her laugh echoed through the speakers, crude and shameless. His voice followed, words that made bile rise in my throat. She's so cold. You're the only one who understands me. The room erupted. Whispers, laughter, disgust. Phones whipped out, cameras flashing. Ethan spun toward me, face pale, then red with rage. Turn it off. Claire, what the hell are you doing? I tilted my head, my smile sharp, showing everyone the man I almost married. You bitch, he hissed, grabbing for my wrist. Before I could move, another hand closed around his, firm, unyielding. Daniel, he stepped between us, his presence like a wall. His voice cut through the chaos. Let go, Ethan. For the first time, Ethan faltered, his bravado crumbled at the sight of his uncle standing there, calm but deadly serious. Uncle Ethan stammered. This isn't what it looks like. Daniel's glare silenced him. It's exactly what it looks like, and if you don't walk away right now, you'll regret it. The room was buzzing, guests whispering, phones recording every second. Ethan's pride was bleeding out in front of them. His face twisted between fury and humiliation. He shoved a hand through his hair, looking around wildly. You can't do this to me, Claire. You need me. You'll come crawling back when you realize no one else wants you. I stepped forward, my voice steady, clear. No, Ethan, I don't need you. I never did. The only thing I regret is giving you 3 years of my life, but tonight, I'm taking them back. The crowd broke into murmurs, supportive, incredulous, entertained. Ethan was done. He tried one last time, lunging toward me, but Daniel's hand hit his chest, shoving him back. The force wasn't violent, but it was enough. Ethan stumbled, his pride shattering along with the applause he craved. And then he was gone, storming out of the ballroom, leaving whispers and camera flashes in his wake. I stood there, shaking, adrenaline pumping through me. For a second, the room blurred. I'd done it. I'd destroyed him. But what surprised me most wasn't the satisfaction. It was the relief, like a weight had finally lifted from my chest, leaving space for something else, something lighter. Daniel's hand touched my arm, steadying me. Are you all right? I looked up at him. His face was still unreadable, that practice mask, but his eyes gave him away. I'm fine, I whispered, better than fine, and for the first time in months, I meant it later. When the guests had thinned and the ballroom was half empty, Daniel found me again. I was standing by the window, staring out at the city lights, replaying everything in my head. You didn't have to get involved, I said quietly. Yes, I did, he answered simply. I turned, searching his face. Why? His jaw worked, like he was weighing every word, then softly. Because I couldn't watch him hurt you. My chest tightened. For a moment, the noise of the night, the sting of betrayal, the satisfaction of revenge, they all faded, and all I saw was him, Daniel Collins. The man I'd thought was just another pawn in my plan, but he wasn't a pawn, he was something else, something I hadn't been ready for. And as he stood there, watching me with that quiet intensity, I realized my story wasn't ending here, it was just beginning. The fallout was faster than I expected. Within days, Ethan's investors pulled out. His so-called company was nothing more than a hollow shell, and when the debts surfaced, they came crashing down like an avalanche. People he'd borrowed from wanted their money back. Loans he couldn't repay were exposed, and then the authorities stepped in. Fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. The list was long enough to bury him. I didn't need to lift a finger, he did it all to himself. When the headlines hit local entrepreneur faces federal charges, I felt a kind of peace I hadn't known was possible. Not joy, not gloating, just peace, because it was over. As for Martha, well, life had a way of punishing people like her. She disappeared from town after the scandal. Whispers following her. Someone told me she'd gotten sick, that she was living off scraps in a run-down motel 2 counties over. I didn't bother to check, whatever her fate was. It wasn't my concern anymore. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying their weight on my shoulders. I threw myself into work, not Ethan's projects, not anyone else's dreams, mine. With Sophie's help, I opened a consulting business. Small at first, but it was mine. Every decision, every late night, every small victory, it all belonged to me. And with every step, I felt more like myself again, stronger, smarter, whole. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the mirror and barely recognize the woman staring back, not because she was broken, like that night in the bathroom, mascara streaked and heart shattered, but because she was alive in a way she hadn't been in years. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Daniel became part of that life slowly, almost reluctantly. He never tried to sweep me off my feet. He never promised to fix me. What he did was show up, quiet, steady, dependable. He checked my bandages until they healed, reminded me to eat when I was buried in work, listened when I needed to let out the ghosts of the past. At first, I told myself not to read too much into it, that he was just being kind. That maybe I was imagining the way his eyes lingered on me a little too long, or the way his voice softened when it was just the two of us. But one night, months after the engagement fiasco, he walked me home after dinner. We stopped outside my building, the city buzzing around us. Claire, he said, my name heavy on his tongue, you've been through hell. You don't need anyone, I know that, but if you ever decide you want someone, I'd like to be that person. I looked at him, at this man who had been a shadow on the edge of my life for years without me realizing it. A man who didn't need saving and didn't need me to be smaller than I was, and for the first time, I let myself want. I think I already do, I whispered. His hand found mine, warm and steady, no fireworks, no whirlwind, just a quiet certainty that felt stronger than anything I'd ever known. Looking back now, I realize revenge wasn't what saved me, it gave me the push. Sure, it lit the fire. But what really saved me was choosing myself, choosing to walk away from the lies, choosing to build a life that was mine, not borrowed or stolen or handed over to someone who didn't deserve it. And yes, Daniel is part of that life now, but even if he weren't, I'd still stand here, proud of the woman I've become, because the truth is, I didn't need Ethan, I didn't even need Daniel, I just needed me. And finally, after everything, I found her. That's all for today's story. Thank you for listening. This is my channel. The tales I share, drawn from life or woven from imagination, are meant to offer you connection, reflection, and perhaps solace or newfound strength. If you long to see your own reflection in others' journeys, or seek a glimmer of light within the maze of emotions, subscribe to my channel. Listen with your heart. Explore the stories of life.